Part-Timer Podcast exclusive episode because the Blackhawks are the center of not-so-good attention. I have a guest today, Kyle Martin. You can follow him on Twitter at McBrooklyn48. Discussing all things Hawks today. Because, Kyle, I don't know if you saw, but I had a little tiff on the Twitter sphere last night.
Yeah, I think I did see something that you had gotten into, because I think, didn't you post that, or I guess tweeted that the goal that was called off wasn't really the impact of the game, that the Hawks had numerous chances to win the game that were not capitalized on, and I think somebody called you dumb or something for that, or something.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know if you saw the end of it, but it kind of sputtered out, and we're all fine. But I guess I'll start with, what was your take on last night's overtime loss?
I'm not as doom and gloom. I mean, anybody that follows me on Twitter knows I'm kind of the Blackhawks, at least most Blackhawk fans, kind of, I guess, public enemy number one usually, because I disagree with most of Blackhawks Twitter. But while I agree with you that the goal didn't necessarily cost them the game, it was the wrong call, and the officiating was putrid, to say the least, the whole game. Obviously, I think it was maybe 30 or 40 seconds before the goal was called off. Ryan Carpenter was literally cross-checked in the face. There was no call, and then he obviously complained and was basically tossed from the game with a 10-minute misconduct.
Which that was a break. They caught a break there, because he could have given him 2 minutes and they would have had a 5-on-3. Right,
but I'm saying, Carpenter is one of the Blackhawks' best penalty killers. And he had a legitimate gripe. And when you're, what was it, 2 minutes left in the game, something like that?
It was late.
I mean, the officials just got to know better in terms of what's going on in the game. You're at a tie game at that point. You just gave a power play to the other team. And, Carpenter's not a guy that, complains. So, but either way, I mean, you also have to keep in mind, this was the Boston Bruins. They're the number one defense team in the league. So, I mean, while the Blackhawks, and we'll get into this later, but have had their offensive struggles, it can't be lost in the fact that Boston's pretty good defensively, and they have, after last night's win, they have the best record in the league. So, really, all things considered, and I think the team kind of, if you watched any of the post-game afterwards,
sure,
kind of said, it was kind of, they hung in there with basically a Stanley Cup contender. I mean, in the President's Trophy, one of the President's Trophy favorites. So, you can't really be all that displeased with it. The game, obviously, that I think that they should be displeased with was the game the day prior against Minnesota, which is a game they should have won handily,
sure,
and didn't.
Well, I think, and this happens all the time with me and with pretty much everybody else when there's something that could be disagreed on. I think my reaction to the game was, I guess, taken a little bit more seriously than I expected or anticipated. I'm not taking this loss as a season ender or just sell everybody at the deadline. But I was upset at the fact that, look, I get it. It's the Bruins. They're, like you said, one of the top defensive teams in the league. And not to mention their penalty kill is tops in the league. Their power play is top. I mean, we're talking about a Goliath opponent coming into the United Center. I'm just upset at the fact that they had 40 minutes before the third period, and they didn't do anything with it. I mean, they came out just as flat as they did in Minnesota. This is kind of like where my argument comes in, and the term, because I use the term I said this team sucks, and that's kind of where everybody was like, okay, relax. And I guess sucks is a subjective term, however you want to take it. I'm saying that this team sucks because of how inconsistent they are. They can't score. I mean, like, they're constantly in these games because of goaltending, and I will say that Slater Cuckoo's been pretty good lately. Ever since he got that second chance, I mean, he's not coming out of the lineup, and the forwards are doing a better job in the defensive zone as of late. But that doesn't discount the fact that Boston had 16 shots in the first period. I think the Hawks had, 7 or 8, which, okay, that's fine. But where are the high danger chances? And not to mention at the end of the game, this was my kind of issue with people saying, and I get it, like, it's a frustrating call when the ref blows the whistle, the intent to blow the whistle, that rule, I know a lot of people are saying that it needs to go. But the Blackhawks had a power play carrying over into overtime. Not to mention you had Taves, Kane, and Gustafsson on the ice, which are your 3 top choices going into overtime. So, like, there were opportunities to win that game. Am I okay with the point? Sure. I mean, I guess I would rather the 2, but that's where me saying this team sucks comes into play. You had a Minnesota game where you had 2 days off in between coming from Arizona, which the Arizona game, good teams turn that game into a momentum builder. And I didn't see any evidence of that from the Hawks. In Minnesota, they came out extremely flat. Crawford, I know we can get into this later too. I know you're not a huge fan of him, but there's no doubt that he kept that team in the game until the third period when the Hawks decided to wake up and play. So that's my issue, is this team could be very, very good. I don't really have much problem with the personnel, but they could have probably 8, 10 points, 10 more points maybe, if they just played more consistent hockey and had better starts.
Yeah, okay. So to jump in on that, I know, so there's a lot that I have to, I guess, one thing I'll to start with, put you in perspective, but also I think in terms of the, we'll get into later about the roster makeup and that kind of thing. But in terms of what's on the team right now and how you just said that they could have, 8, 10 points more than they currently do, that's true. And I think if you look at the big picture, I know you've been commenting with their surge lately on Twitter about, are they going to be buyers, or what is out there for them to buy? And I know I listened to your, I think, last episode where you kind of referenced me getting into it with a Minnesota fan, but, the Hawks, even if they are buyers, which they're not really going to be, they're going to be a buyer in the sense of, like the guys I was mentioning, 40-year-old Joe Thornton, 36-year-old Ilya Kovalchuk. They're not going to go out and get somebody that's going to cost a lot of assets.
Yeah, they're not emptying the tank for a Panarin again.
No, because they're not there. And
right.
And then that's kind of the whole, if you're Bowman, who put himself in this mess to begin with, which we'll get to. But Bowman has to be in the worst position. He's kind of like Yarmo was in Columbus last season, where you had Panarin and Bob and all these guys that were basically you knew were going to leave, but you have this good team. Do you go for it, and do you sell all your assets to bring in guys to go for it, or whatever? And Bowman's kind of in the flip side, where does he give up assets, or does he try to give guys away that he is not going to bring back to bring in some assets? Because the Blackhawks, and again, we'll get into all this later, but just peripherally, their forward prospect pool is garbage. They have, I don't remember who it was, so I apologize, but it was in The Athletic. It was put out a few days ago that they were ranked the 12th best prospect pool, and basically probably four out of their top 5 prospects are defensemen.
Yeah. So
they can't afford to give up draft picks, really. I mean, maybe like for Thornton, maybe you give a Dylan Sakura and a late round pick, or a Hagel or Highmore, whatever. It's not going to be much. But anyway, as the roster, to put you in perspective, so when you say this team sucks, I don't agree with that. They're like, so you've got Alex.
Again, I mean,
Kirby.
Well, it's more of a subjective. Like they don't suck. Like if they sucked, they would be 14-40. They just,
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind, you've got Alex Nylander, Dominic Kubalik, Kirby Dach, Adam Boquist. You've had Dylan Sakura. You've had Dennis Gilbert. All of those guys are playing in their first full season in the NHL this season. That's, a fourth of the roster. Then if you add in the fact Dylan Strome, this is his second full season in the NHL. This is DeBrincat's third. Highmore, I think this is basically his first season. I think he played 1 or 2 games last year or something like that. And David Camp, this is his third full season. And you've got over half your roster that at most is in like their third season in the league. This is a very, very young team, which is why, and we'll get into this later, I'm not a big Colliton fan, just like you. And there's a lot of people on Twitter that are, they should never have fired Quenneville. No, they should have fired Quenneville. He needed to go. It wasn't working. It's the same thing with the Cubs and Joe Madden. At a certain point, a coach, wherever they are, they become stale and they have to go. It doesn't take away from their legacy and anything they've done. You just got to get somebody new in the room. But when you have a team like the Blackhawks, that's a young team mixed within a lot of older guys, hiring a 35-year-old coach, probably not the smartest decision. So when you look at and this goes back to the trade deadline as well, and why Bowman is not in an enviable position. The Blackhawks could go on a run. The Western Conference is weak. There is nobody in the West that scares me. Nobody, including the Blues. In fact, if you look at the Blues and how they're structured, they're very, very similar to the Blackhawks. They have elite goaltending. They're pretty decent defensively. They've got 1 or 2 really big scorers. They maybe, you could argue they have a better coach. But again, it's hard to argue that when you've got the guy that's 36 in his second year coaching, basically.
I just think the only difference, and I agree, I agree with pretty much everything that you just said. I think the only difference in the comparison with the Blues and the Hawks is the Blues are just getting production. I mean,
yeah, but they're more experienced too, though. Like, and people are going to argue with Kubalik. He's like, well, he's 25 or 24 or whatever he is. Yeah, but this is his first season in the NHL.
Yeah, the NHL is a league of its own. I don't know why. Yeah.
And I don't like Kubalik. You know that. But, you can't sit and, even you don't really like Nylander. And I will argue and we'll get into this later, the Henry Jokiharju Alex Nylander trade was actually the best trade that Bowman made. It's maybe not working out like fans wanted, but when you look at the Blackhawks prospects, they're all defensemen. And what have we been talking about this whole time? What's been going wrong with this season? And I would argue not just this season, but prior seasons. Ever since we've traded Panarin, we don't have top six scoring. They've never replaced it. So Bowman naturally thinking, well, I've got a surplus of this. The coach doesn't like Jokiharju. This is my coach. I've got to work with him. So let's give Jokiharju, to Buffalo, and let's get Alex Nylander, who's the 8th overall pick in his draft year. He comes from a good pedigree. His brother's lighting it up. His dad was a Blackhawk. Makes a lot of sense. And he's young. And he was injured a third of the year prior, so he really didn't get a chance to play all that much. So on paper, it looked like the right decision. And I understand what Bowman was trying to do in trying to bring in, a guy that could play in the top six without giving out a big contract, without trading away a major piece off the roster. Because, the Blackhawks do not miss Jokiharju right now. Everybody on Blackhawks
no, they don't.
The Blackhawks Twitter needs to stop reading into all of the beat writers and everything. Calm down. Look, the Blackhawks have the 6th best penalty kill in the league. They allowed 1 goal in regulation to Boston last night. Granted, the goaltending has been elite, but you don't need this overarching major league defense to win. If you can't score, it's irrelevant. You're not going to win if you don't score. So we'll get to it later with what they need to do, obviously. But I think you and I both agree the major issue on this team right now is the top 6. And
100%.
while Alex DeBrincat has played like shit, he is only in his 3rd season. And, he's been without Dylan Strome for, 2 weeks that he was out. He's been up and down the lineup. And, Dylan Strome is another question mark because, his contract, he needs a contract, but he's not been playing well since he came back. I don't know if that's the injury or what. But he doesn't necessarily play well either when he's not with DeBrincat. And if DeBrincat's not playing well, they're both going to struggle.
Well, that's kind of the entire offense, nobody's playing well. I mean, that's kind of what we can agree on. What it boils down to is you have. So I remember we were talking a couple weeks ago. And you said, if they're going to do anything, the Hawks need, they need that 3rd scorer. As of right now, they have Kane, Kubalik, and Taves can find the back of the net, but he's been the quarterback on the ice as of late. DeBrincat is that 3rd guy, but he's not the 3rd guy. If that makes any sense, he's the guy, but his performance isn't there, and neither is, to be completely frank, neither is 90% of the offense.
Well, I think when you're talking about that too, you have to keep in mind too when you're talking about this team and the way it's constructed. Taves is declining. It took him 3 months of this season till December, essentially, or 2.5 months, let's say, to start playing well. He was awful to start this season. Awful. And when you have $10.5 million locked up in him, that's not good. Granted, his contract's nowhere near as bad as some on the roster, but you need more from him. And he had a career year last year. He's probably never going to replicate that again. But you need him and Kane, and Kane's going to decline. Kane still has probably 8 or 9 years left. Most elite players now are playing till age 40 or 42, depending on how their injuries are and their body holds up. And he's 31. So he's probably got another 2, maybe 3 years at this level, and then he's going to start to decline. he instead of 80 points a year, maybe he's 50 points a year. Kind of like, we saw with guys. If you look at the San Jose Sharks, actually, they're very similar in how the Sharks' old core of Marlowe, Thornton, and
Pavelski.
I don't know if I want to throw Pavelski. I guess Pavelski will throw in there. He's not there anymore. But those three guys, and then you guys had like Hurdle, Couture, you got Timo Meyer now, you got Kevin LeBanc, you got these new younger guys. Those guys are kind of like the Stromes and the Brinkets and the Docs, so they're coming along. So they're very similar in terms of where the Sharks were a couple of years ago, where their main core is aged, but now they've got these young guys coming in. And then their defense was probably further along than the Hawks is right now. But, that aside, the Hawks are not far away, which again puts it's Bowman's own mess. And, I don't know if you want to get into what they need to do in the off season, but you got to re-sign Leonard. Crawford's regardless of what you think about Crawford, logistically, he's 36. He's injury prone. He's not a good investment. Leonard is, at least the last two seasons, arguably been the best goalie in the league. Is he going to get Sergei Bobrovsky money? No. Carey Price money? No. But he's going to be somewhere in that, just below that, in that, $8 to $9 million range. So if you're going to keep DeBrincat and Strome, who needs a new contract, and to me, I think it's vital that you keep Drake Caggiula. I think he's one of the best bottom six players in the league, and he can even play, as we've seen. And you want to talk about Bowman's best trade. I mean, Brandon Manning for Drake Caggiula doesn't get much better than that.
Right.
I mean, that was pure robbery. I don't know what the hell Peter Chiarelli was thinking, but Jesus.
Anyway. I would actually agree with re-signing Leonard, and here's my perspective on Corey Crawford. Now, I'll stick up for Crawford, but I will also be realistic in saying that, yeah, next year he's not going to be the guy. You don't want a 37-year-old backup goaltender. Not to mention, Lankinen's and Rockford. At some point, they're going to have to come up. Unless you, for some reason, want to deal them for starting goal. I don't know why you would want to do that, but who knows with Stan Bowman.
Somebody in the system is not coming back because they just re-signed Tompkins, which I don't know. I haven't really followed him much this year, but basically he's pretty old. He's 25, 26, and this is really his first kind of season in the AHL. He's basically been an East AHL goalie his whole career. So that would kind of lead me to believe that one of Leonard and Crawford is not coming back. I know a lot of people have speculated, well, maybe you give Leonard, the big long-term deal, and then Crawford comes back for less money. Well, the only way they could make that work without gutting somewhere on the roster is if Crawford took $1 million, which we can agree he's not going to do. That's kind of. I think all signs.
You got to deal him.
Yeah.
You got to. Look, there's some talk, and I'll be the first to admit that outside of the Hawks and the Central Division and whoever plays on national TV, I'm not sitting here following the rest of the NHL, so I couldn't tell you exactly who needs what around the league as we approach the deadline. But if somebody needs a goalie, deal him. I get it. I get
Toronto,
I get the nostalgia factor of, hey, Crawford, he won a Stanley Cups and he's been here with the core and blah, blah. Look, that's a business decision. You have a 35-year-old goaltender who, yes, has won you games this year, but if you're not going to go on a run and you have a buyer for Corey Crawford, I think you have to deal him. If you let him walk away after this season, that's a bad move.
I think you have to deal him, even if you're going to go for it.
That's kind of fair. That's a fair point, because either way, I mean, he's not going to take $1 million.
Right. Well, and to me, look, the Blackhawks, this year's wide open in the West. I would be stunned if somebody from the West wins the Cup this year. It's just, I don't know what's going on, but I mean, you've got basically everybody in the Pacific is right on top of each other. Like Calgary, I think, is in one of the wild card spots, and they won the division last year, and they're only like 3 or 4 points out of first place.
Yeah, everything is pretty much a logjam.
Yeah, and in the Central, nobody scares me. I mean, the Avs haven't put it together. Dallas has kind of come on strong here lately, but St. Louis is beatable. I mean, the only difference to me between the Hawks and St. Louis maybe is better coached, and they're more experienced. So, and they have that playoff experience. The Hawks don't, which is amazing to say considering the last decade. But, I mean, Connor Murphy's never played in a playoff game, and he's in their Blackhawks top 4. Seabrook and DeHaan are gone. After Duncan Keith and Ole Mata, who's a third pairing guy, you don't have anybody on the back end that's been in the playoffs regularly. Gustafsson, obviously, we all know, played for Chicago for a few games and had the infamous turnover that got the Hawks bounced, and then Quenneville kept them in Rockford for 2 years. But you can't get mad at the Hawks as currently constructed when you consider they're inexperienced and they're young. And I think that's probably part of the frustration that we saw earlier in the year with Kane, Taves, Keith. They want to be here. I'm pretty sure that none of them really want to go, but it's hard when you've got all of these young kids. And again, that's on Bowman. But I will say this team kind of reminds me of the Hawks, like Kane and Taves' first year in 2008. Like, very similar. I think the Hawks are going to make the playoffs this year. And mainly because the West is weak. But if you look at 2008, you had, kind of the old ragtag Blackhawks, and then you had, Kane and Taves emerging, and Patrick Sharp, who they acquired, I think, the year previously at the deadline or something of that nature, plus Chris Versteeg. So you had all these new young players coming in. They brought in Quenneville, and they were just missing one guy. And what'd they do the next year after they lost to, I believe, Detroit in the conference final? They went out and got Marian Hossa. And then that set them off. I mean, that was the move that they needed. They needed that top 6 scorer. I mean, when Hossa initially came here, he was a scorer. I mean, he was good defensively, but he scored. Much different than his later years in Chicago that most people probably remember him by.
Well, when Hossa came, when he came to the Hawks, you didn't have just Taves, Kane, and Hossa scoring goals. I mean, you had the first 3 lines were scoring goals.
Right. But, see, I would argue, think about this. I guess we'll just go into what I don't see. To me, I'll start with this. If I were Rocky Wirtz, John McDonough would be fired, Stan Bowman would be fired, and Jeremy Colleton would be fired. Who do you bring in as the general manager? I don't know. And I'm saying to fire McDonough because he's a baseball guy. I mean, everybody gives him all this credit for turning. I mean, he's a business guy. He's a marketer. He doesn't know about hockey. And McDonough's the guy. He's Bowman's boss. So you've got a guy that knows nothing about hockey, basically overseen everything. Like, he's the guy. He's the guy that's got to fire Bowman when it gets to that point. Well, Bowman's his boy. And I will argue this night and day, Dale Talon is the architect of the Blackhawks, not Stan Bowman. Stan Bowman, if anything, pissed most of it away. Not right away, but, I mean, other than Brandon Saad and Panarin, and I would argue Panarin was more Blackhawks scouting, which I think is second to none. What has he done? Who has he drafted? I guess Tebow maybe, but he traded Tebow. Why? Because he gave a ridiculous contract to Brian Bickle.
Yeah.
They gave They gave Brian Bickle $4 million, and this is 10 years ago almost. Like, when the cap was 10 or 15 million less than it is now. So that's $4 million then was a lot of money. And Bickle had never had a season, like a career, like he was never a scorer. He had a good 15 games in that 2013.
I was going to say, I mean, the only reason really why he got that big contract is because he had those good playoff performances. But, I mean, look, obviously you want players who can play in the playoffs, but I've always argued, and I get it that this is just the way it works. I've always argued that paying a player for what he's done in the past is always going to bite you in the ass. Because
typically, yes.
Because, look, I mean, if you send, let's just say, this is the first example that's coming to mind. Let's just say Patrick Kane scores, let's just say he goes nuts and scores 60 goals next season. And you're like, holy shit. And then the wheels fall off. His contract is void, just some crazy shit. And then let's say New York gives him $15 million, just something crazy. And then he scores 13 goals. Who looks stupid? Kane doesn't care. He's making $15 million. It's the front office. And that's kind of like these unbelievably just awful, like the Seabrook contract. No matter who likes Seabrook or not, everybody's like, look, can we just pretend this isn't happening? Because
see, I agree, but like I was thinking about that. Even if you look at, let's just take this season, and if you look at including the off season, what Bowman did. So everybody wanted the defense, and he did need to add defenders, but he brought in Mata. I was a big fan of that deal because you got a guy that has won 2 championships on a great team, and he's 24. And he's already got 2 rings. And he's on an affordable deal. Well, then he went and got DeHaan for nothing. He gave up Forsling and Forsberg, 2 guys that are never going to be in the NHL. So that seemed like a win. And he got Alessi, Sorella, or Antti, whatever, one of the Sorellas. And he traded him away for nothing. That's a goal scorer. The guy put up 30 goals in the AHL. Think about I'm not saying he would work, but it would have been an option that you could have called up from Rock, especially with all these injuries. And what was it, a week into the season, Bowman traded him?
Yeah, instead you're calling up Hagel.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even think Hagel's played.
No, he hasn't played.
They called him up to sit in the stands, I guess. But so that's just that. But you acquired DeHaan, who you knew was injured. Like, you knew he was injured last year. And you knew you had Brent Seabrook and Duncan Keith. Duncan Keith has had a really big bounce-back season. And really, Seabrook wasn't all that bad before he got hurt. I mean, considering. So you knew you had 2 old geezers. You didn't know what you were going to get from Keith. He was not particularly good last year. He's been, like I said, much better this year, thankfully. But you just brought in another aging guy who's got a $4 million contract for the next 3 years after this season. So you've got half of your defense is on the wrong side of 30. and you're paying Seabrook $7 million, Keith you're paying like $5.5 million, somewhere in there. So that's what, $12.5 million. Then you just brought in $4 million with DeHaan. So those three guys alone, who are all over 30, is over $15 million. Then you add Mata into that. Now you're at almost 20. Then you add Gustafson, who's cheap, so that's kind of irrelevant. Murphy's another $3.5 million. So by the time you add a seventh defenseman, you're already at like $25 million. And this is what slays me about Blackhawks Twitter. Everyone's like, we got to get more defense. We've got to get more defense.
There's no money to get the defense.
there's no money, and why? You've got Adam Boqvist, and this is what the point I was making with Nylander and Yoki Haru. You've got Adam Boqvist. Ian Mitchell will be on the roster next year. He would have been on the roster this season, and Bowman probably screwed himself. I don't know if I can swear on
you can
on here, but
yeah.
Okay. Well, he fucked himself because Mitchell probably would have signed. But when you bring in two defensemen, there's nowhere to play. And Mitchell was a second-round pick. And when you've got Boqvist, and I believe Yoki Haru was still here at this point, where's he going to play? Like, he's just fell down the depth chart. So naturally, he was just on a team that was in the national title game. He's going to go back and try to win a national championship. Why wouldn't he? Like, so Bowman was his own worst enemy there. But either way, Mitchell will be here next year. Like, I don't think he's not going to sign. All indications are that he's going to sign.
Yeah, I think.
So now you got him in the mix too.
I think the point you bring up about the Yoki Haru deal and the fact that there was that's 100% true that pretty much all of our depth is in the defensive pot, and like you said, they needed to start bulking up that forward depth. And I guess I can agree that I do agree that trading Yoki Haru, who knows what any of these players are going to turn into in the next couple of years, but you decide to get rid of him and grab a forward. And I mean, right now, yeah, Nylander's young and he's got to start coming into his own. I think he has flashes of like, hey, he could be pretty good. It's just not working right now. So I think the frustration of the initial letdown is kind of weighing in, and it's also because just the Hawks aren't winning. I mean, they're winning, but
maybe it's his last name. I mean, his brother's doing gangbusters. Everybody knows his dad. Maybe that's a part of it. But I still maintain, because I hear this, and like I just, was scrolling through Twitter, and all the wonderful college-age blogs are going on about how great Kirby Dach has been. Kirby Dach has not been better than Nylander. Recently, yes, he's played very well. He's on a 5-game point streak. But if you look at their statistics for the season, they're almost identical. I think Nylander's played 2 more games than Dach. I think Dach is, in terms of ice time, is about a minute more. And point-wise, they're within like 1 or 2 points of each other.
I think the big thing that people see in Dach is his hockey IQ is much higher than Alex Nylander's. And that could develop over time. I mean, that's something that is going to evolve for every player. But Nylander, Kirby Dach isn't dumping the puck into the offensive zone 7 feet in front of the red line. Like it's the biggest problem with Alex Nylander, and why he gets so much shit is because he's making those bonehead plays. And look, if you don't make those stupid plays and you're just struggling, it's like, man, like he's got to get going. And that's pretty much all you can say. But he's making bonehead plays, and that's why he's getting a ton of scrutiny. I want him to be good. I don't want to hate anybody on this team. I don't want the team to suck. I want everybody to put up 40 goals and 90 points. But the fact of the matter is he's not living up to what we were hoping for. Maybe that changes next year. Like you said, this is a young guy. He's not 29 years old in his 5th year in the NHL. He's new. So giving it time is kind of the biggest obstacle with myself and with other Hawks fans. It's like, look, man, we just won 3 cups in a decade, and now we're like watching this team try and rebuild itself. And to be completely honest with you, I think what another issue is the fact that Taves and Kane aren't, like, they're not gone, like they're not retired. So seeing Kane and Taves in a Blackhawks uniform still makes everybody think like, hey, like we can contend every single year, and like we should be battling for the Central Division first place spot every single year. But as we've discussed so far, there's a lot of young players on this team. And
well, I mean, that's just that goes to the point. I think the fans are correct. They should be fighting for first place right now, but they're not, because the guy that's at the helm and subsequently the guy that's his boss have failed the fans. Bowman should have been gone last year, and this was kind of the point. And one last point on Doc and Nylander. Look, the fact that we're talking about Doc and Nylander and that the Blackhawks Twitter's all over Nylander, that says enough in and of itself that those two guys are being relied on too much, because the other guys,
no one else is scoring.
We shouldn't be talking about Nylander or Doc. If this was 7 years ago, like when Saad was coming up, whenever Saad did something, like, oh, what a pleasant surprise. Oh, Brandon Peary. Well, he might be able to make it. I remember Brandon Boley coming up. It was like, oh, well, this guy might be pretty good. Well, no, it didn't turn out that way. But that's when you were scoring and you had a good top 6, you could do that. You could bring guys along slowly. Well, they can't do that right now because of how this roster's been mismanaged. So the point I was making when I was bringing up the salaries of the defense and the 2 guys that Bowman just acquired, and the other monkey wrench in this whole thing is the expansion draft's coming up too.
Yep.
That's a whole nother thing. But you've got Calvin DeHaan was injured before the season started. He played about 2 months, and now he's out for the season. So for that $4 million that he's taking up, he played about 2 months. Then the worst trade by far of the offseason, Bowman goes and gives up the 2nd-round draft pick in this year's draft of a loaded draft class, one of the best of the last 10 years, maybe only second to McDavid's class. And then he gives up also a 3rd-round pick to bring back Andrew Shaw, who had a career year last year, but is injury-prone, who's on the wrong side of 30.
I also don't think Andrew Shaw is I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I don't think he's that good of a player.
He isn't. He isn't.
I think the issue is, and this is kind of where my frustration is with Stan Bowman. I don't think he's the greatest GM. I don't think he's the absolute worst GM, but I do think I do think there are times where I'm like, oh damn, like that's a hell of a deal. Like we fleeced whoever we're trading with. He got fleeced with the Andrew Shaw deal.
Perlini trade, for example.
Yeah, he got fleeced trading with Montreal, and I expect more out of Stan Bowman. I don't expect him to go give up assets for a player who just had a career year that is likely to decline. I expect him to buy low. I expect him to go get somebody where like, who the fuck is this guy? And then he has a pretty good year, and we're like, all right, okay, we'll take the win on that one, I guess. But instead,
he's bad at that too.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like there's some times where he pulls out a trade, and you're like, okay, yeah, that works. But the Shaw trade, for example, I agree with you. I was like, okay, it was the nostalgia factor. I liked the fact that Andrew Shaw was coming back just for the fact that it was Andrew Shaw, but I didn't like the fact that we gave up more than I thought we should have.
Well, it's not just I'm okay with giving up assets if I'm getting something back that's going to work or that I need. I don't know. I don't remember which happened first, but he also went and acquired Zach Smith for Anisimov. And Anisimov needed to go, and he ended up saving about $1 million on the cap. However, you look at the free agents last year, and we've gone over this. The number one problem last year and then going into this offseason is they need a top six forward. Well, if you look, Andrew Shaw is making $3.9 million, so for sake of argument, let's just say $4 million. So you've got DeHaan and Shaw. Both of those guys, I don't think Shaw is going to play again this year. So that's both guys played 2 months of the season. That's $8 million. If you throw in Zach Smith, that's $11 million. 11.5 because he's got a $3.5 million deal. That would have re-signed Panarin.
Yeah. And then I think
you're talking about two of those guys who aren't even playing.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's my point. You could have went and got. I don't like the player, but he's got a good skill set. So if you look at, I think one of the things I've been talking about to try to get the Brinkett and Strome going, because I don't think Strome's going to be a center, even though that's what he was drafted as. He's going to be a winger. He can't win faceoffs. You could have went and got Matt Duchene for $7 or $8 million. And then, the Smith would have been irrelevant. You could have done that with just Shaw and DeHaan. And you could have brought in Mitchell a year earlier. Like, the mismanagement of the salary cap. And that's with Brent Seabrook on the roster.
Yeah.
You can forget about. Is it a bad contract? Yes. But is that handicapping Chicago? No. Bowman he had $20-some million this past year. And he spent it on Zach Smith, Ole Mata, Calvin DeHaan, and Andrew Shaw, and Robin Leonard. And Ryan Carpenter. Carpenter was a good deal for $1 million. It was low cost, great penalty killer, two-way forward, great deal. Leonard, I questioned it at the time because it seemed to me that, Delia or Lankinen had just won a gold medal. Like, what are you doing? Like, you need a forward. And obviously, that's, when Nylander came in. But, I don't think he knows what he's doing. Like, he doesn't know what he wants to do.
I think he wants to be too savvy, to be completely honest with you.
Maybe.
I think he's like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna try and go and finesse the league and shock everybody and go, wow, Stan Bowman is really, he's really putting it together again in Chicago. But I also think that sometimes he tries to be instinctive. Like, oh no, I know this is going to be a good move. And he just does it. And then it's like,
yeah, it's the Panarin trade.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Todd's under contract for two additional years. So, Kane has never been the same since Panarin left. Kane, again, think about that. When you talk about Patrick Kane, who, when his career is over, is going to be the best American to ever play, and he just hit 1,000 points for only 2 years of his career. And let's just exclude the few times Quenneville put him with Taves early on or, in a pinch. You look at who he's played with throughout his career. A washed-up Brad Richards, a young Brandon Saad, Brian Bickle. I mean, now he's with an 18-year-old Kirby Doc, and again, was it Saad? Yeah. I mean, you look at the guys he's played with, it's literally fucking amazing that he's put up the numbers he has. And then when you finally got a guy like a Panarin and you put him with him, like, there was just bromance, whatever you want to call it. And then I can't imagine being Kane at that draft. Because was that the draft that was in Chicago too, I think?
I can't.
I think it was.
I want to say yes, but I can't remember. I believe it. Actually, you know what? I believe it was, because that was kind of.
Didn't Quenneville like run out or something after he traded? Because he traded Jarmelson and Panarin within minutes of each other, and like I think Quenneville, from the reports, was unsubstantiated. Like stormed out of the UC for at least a while until they went up and picked Yoki Harvey with Kane and Taves. So Kane must have been there too. So like I again, they had the same cap hit. Like, and think about this. This is what's even more insane. Had you not traded Panarin, you would have had Alex DeBrincat and Panarin on the same roster. So those 40 goals that he put up last year and the 50 or 60, close to 60 points he had his first year, he's awful this year, obviously. I don't know if that's the pressure from the contract or what it is. I know he just got engaged too, so maybe it's part of that. I don't know. But I don't think you're a baseball guy, right? So yeah. I always tell people I've never seen DeBrincat, to me, and Cubs fans are going to groan, is the like equivalency of Alfonso Soriano. When he's on, he is on, and when he isn't, he isn't. He's either gangbusters or he's terrible, and I think that's the player he's going to be. I don't think he's ever gonna, really put it all together where he's just good all year. He's going to have ups and downs, which again is only, emphasized when you have Brandon Saad, who's playing like shit. And that's another $6 million. And to me, he needs to go. Well, he's going to have to go probably if you're going to keep Strome and Leonard and Kajula, who I think you definitely need to keep. But you can't keep everybody. And it's kind of to me, what have you done for me lately? And Saad hasn't done it. He's been terrible. Has he been better this year? Yes. But he's still not worth $6 million.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say. I think the opposition might say, okay, well, Brandon Saad he's been playing pretty well lately, and yeah, I mean he's not the Brandon Saad of old, but he's filling somewhat of an offensive void when he's scoring. But I agree with you. I agree with you. He is not worth $6 million. That's kind of what it comes down to. Is it's almost like, look, I'm okay with a player not completely lighting it up all year long or going on these cold streaks. Like if Alex DeBrincat was the last guy on our payroll, I'd be like, all right. I mean, whatever. I'm getting what I'm paying for. But they just extended him, which should actually relieve some of the pressure. But it's not.
What's scary about that contract, though? So because there's still a year of arbitration eligibility on it, when that contract is over, to re-sign him, and this is because they got him to take less money, because at the time when he signed it was like, whoa, Bowman really pulled off a miracle here, because all these guys that are, whether it's, granted, DeBrincat's not Mitch Marner or Matthews, but these guys that are getting these $9 to $10, $11 million contracts, and especially with the cap going up, like, DeBrincat was looking at like $8 to $10 million probably, somewhere in that range. and then he gets him at 6 on this like bridge deal. But because of the way the contract's structured, after these 3 years, if you're going to re-sign him in that arbitration year, you have to pay him $9 million. $9 million. If DeBrincat doesn't bounce back, and this is what he is, who in the hell is going to pay him $9 million?
Yeah, I'll be gone.
Yeah, that is frightening. That deal looked like a good deal when it was made, which brings me to my point from earlier that you had made about how, Bowman goes for like a buy low guy that we've never heard of that comes in. Remember Richard Panik?
Yeah, sure do.
To me, yeah, to me, that's why I don't understand. It's like, I don't know if Blackhawks fans have like short memory or whatever, but he reminds me a lot of Kubalik, where he comes in and he has like a 20-goal season. Granted, Panik has been around longer than Kubalik, but everybody's like, with Kubalik anyway, and you've got beat writers doing it, give him $9 million now, before it gets any higher. Kubalik's disappeared since the All-Star break. He's done nothing. He had a good week, 2 weeks. And
yeah,
now,
I think that was I think that's what's been inflating. I get it that you don't like him, but I think that there's points, and this is like I hate to put him in the same conversation, but this is like Nylander. I think Kubalik is showing that he could be worth, a high dollar in the future, and
right,
he could be
give them that.
Right, he could be could be, he could be an asset to the Hawks offense in the future. And yes, I get it. He's one of the top rookies, but he scored half of his goals in 10 days.
Yeah, you don't. Well, and a lot of his goals too, and this has been my argument. Like, if you watch him, he's average speed, maybe a little bit above average. Passing's not very good. And he doesn't, if you talk about hockey IQ, he doesn't create his scoring chances. He's always around the net, which the Hawks need. And he's always getting rebounds or garbage goals, that kind of thing. He's had a couple with his shot that he's, done himself. But usually his goals are coming off the work of other players. So, again, kind of that Richard Panik thing. And if you remember, Bowman makes a good trade, brings in Richard Panik. I think he was on like a 2-year deal. He played like 10 games, and then the next season started, and he had that 20-goal year. So then Bowman goes, well, we're going to extend him. And I think they gave him like $2.5 million for 3 years or something like that. And then the next day, literally in the like Sun Times or the Tribune, I don't remember what writer it was, but they went and asked, Panik, like, well, were you happy with your offer or whatever? And Panik goes, yeah, I couldn't believe he offered me that. I signed it right away. Like, when a player says that, it's like, so you didn't even negotiate? Bowman just threw you. Like, here you go. It's like, oh, really? I wasn't expecting that. Where do I sign? That's what I mean. Like, I with that in mind, how do you let Bowman stay? Like, and that's the crazy thing now too, right? You're in this weird position. The West is winnable. You don't really want to sell assets though, because you need them. So you don't really want to be a buyer. And then you've got assets like Gustafson or Crawford that would be valuable to somebody else that you could probably get assets for. You've got all this cap space that you could weaponize. Like, and by weaponize, I mean take on a bad contract from somebody else. But what do you do? And Bowman's the guy that's going to make these decisions.
Yeah, I think the scary thing is who. I mean, you basically just said it. Who are you gonna? If you really are, if you really are a seller at the deadline, or even the other way around. Let's say something crazy happens and all of a sudden it's like, hey, look, like we're one guy away from really turning it on. Everything is falling into place. It's going well. We feel like we can make a run. The only two guys I'm comfortable with getting rid of is Crawford and Gustafson. And Crawford, the only reason why is because his contract's up, and if you let him walk away, that's stupid on your end. And Gustafsson is he's middle of the road for me. So those are the only two guys that I can see getting rid of. And the scary thing is we've seen Bowman get rid of play, and we're like, what? What, you got rid of him? Why?
Well, I think I don't want to bring this up too because it's died down a little bit, but with them drafting Kirby with the pick, shocked most people, including all of the analysts, but Blackhawks fans especially, that wanted Bowen Byram. And I don't look. I'm tooting my own horn here, so bear with me. My ego is showing. But I said all offseason, like, Bowen Byram's going to be a bust. Stay away from him. And aside from the fact that you have all of these deep prospects, stay away from him. And you look, Bowen Byram is having a horrible year at juniors. Horrible. Like, I think he's got half the points that he had last year. And the season's pretty much almost over before the playoffs are going to begin here pretty soon for Canadian juniors. Conversely, you look at a move Bowman made that I mentioned earlier that looks genius. You gave Brandon Perlini, who was not very good, to Detroit, and you had Alex Regula. Regula has more points this year than Byram does, at least the last time I looked. And you got him for Brandon Perlini.
Yeah, I'm gonna admit something, and I'm not very proud of this, but I was a little upset that the way like Perlini wanted to play and they weren't playing him, so I was kind of I don't like when shit like that happens. I was upset that they got rid of him because I really thought that he might fit into the offense. I thought he would be a player like we saw in the little amount of time where he came back at the end of last year, where he came back and scored like 4 goals in like 2 games, and we're like, holy shit, Brandon Perlini's back. But it happens. Like, you're wrong on a trade, and I'll be happy to live with it, because when I said I can't believe they traded Perlini, not completely knowing who we got back, I was like, okay, well, this is dumb. And of course I got fired on for that too. But 100%, I'll admit when I'm wrong, that was one where I overlooked the trade, and now it's seemingly paying off in its early stages.
Good. But and I've been wrong. I thought Connor Murphy was garbage, and he wasn't very good his first year. And I shit on that trade as well as the Panarin trade, but I actually agreed with Bowman that trading Jarmelson was actually a good move, because he was 30, he had a big cap hit, and he was worn down. And it showed in that playoff series.
When you block 150 shots a year, yeah, you're going to be
right. Well, and look at his injuries that he's had. So that was smart, but I would still maintain that you could have got something better than Connor Murphy for him. And that was my problem with it. And we're seeing where now Connor Murphy's a top 4 defenseman, right? So it I guess in a ways worked, but you could have had. I mean, it played into how bad the defense was, because you got to. I mean, I think at the time he was like 23 when they got him for Jarmelson, so another young guy, right? And it's like, you can't just bring all of these young guys in and go, all right, we're gonna win. We're a playoff team.
All right.
No.
Right.
That's like either the Cubs or White Sox or in any league, or we won't mention the Bulls because that's been an ongoing disaster for 20 years. But you look at any of these teams that have rebuilt, that bring in young kids, they're not going to do gangbusters right away. And in this case, the Blackhawks are kind of different than everybody else because they've still pretty much got their core. They've just lost all of the secondary pieces. The Hostas, the Sharps, the Panarins, the Jarmelsons, the Crow was out for 2 years with concussions. And I'm not a Crow fan, but what was behind him was not good. So, again, it goes back to Bowman. And look, Colleton deserves credit for how they've played and how they've improved, especially with the PK being sixth in the league. I think the graphic last night said that the Blackhawks have killed like 45 out of their last 50 penalties, which is just ridiculous. But to me, this team needs a Gerard Gallant, or it needs that Quenneville strict fatherly figure that can come in, that the veterans will respect, and that can teach the young kids. You can't afford, in the position that you're in, to have this kid, basically. I mean, he's all like my age, coaching this team who's done nothing. Like, this is like if I were coaching the Blackhawks with no pro experience, basically. And Colleton really doesn't have pro experience because of his injuries. I mean, and that's not to say that people like that can't be a good coach, but at some point, you've got to realize where you're at. And to me, I'm not willing to sacrifice the next 2 years of Kane and Taves to let Colleton adapt into a good coach. Right?
Yeah, I think, and that's been my gripe with Colleton the whole time, is he's not the guy. And I tried giving him a chance last season, and just because, I mean, look, man, you're filling Joel Quenneville's shoes. That's got to be nerve-wracking, and there's a ton of pressure. This isn't, you're not playing hockey in like fucking Montana. Like, this is Chicago. This is the third largest market in the United States, and there's a lot of pressure. So I gave him a chance. But when you have a bad game, and I get it, sometimes, situations call for it. But when you have an absolutely terrible game and they've been playing bad lately and reporters are asking you questions and you go, well, I think we just got to build on the momentum. We had the second period was good. I thought we passed well. Our changes were sharp. Pucks were on net. So, you just got to build on it. No, get the fuck out of here, man. I'm so sick of like this lollygagging, like, for a lack of a better term, snowflake coaching style. It goes to your point. Get in the locker room, kick a fucking stool, and be like, get your heads out of your asses. Because I'll tell you right now, if you keep playing this way, you're not going to be playing. Like,
well, that's kind of just, I don't, so there's been rumors that Taves, like, we know everything about Seabrook and Colleton, but there's been quite a few rumors, too, that Taves does not like Colleton. And when Taves doesn't like Colleton, you've got a problem. Because that's your captain. He's, regardless of what you want to say about Keith and Seabrook, Taves is the leader. And when he doesn't like Colleton, and Colleton's, I think, just had his birthday, I think he's 36. Yep. Taves is 30. And Taves is much more experienced in hockey and a much better career, obviously, than Colleton. That's the other thing. Like, with Colleton, he had 1.5 years of minor league coaching. Like, that's like, we're not just talking about a rookie NHL coach. We're talking about a rookie coach in general. Sure, he coached in Europe, but Europe is not North America. Like, it's just mind-blowing to me. And even the fans that watched Rockford closely, who thought Colleton was going to be an heir apparent, they thought he was several years away. So, and maybe he was. Maybe Colleton will be a great coach. But, Q started somewhere, right? But the Hawks are not in the position of a rebuilding team. They did, but they're kind of on the fly. Like, they're not the Devils. They're not the Kings. They can win if they have the right pieces. They're not that far away. They really aren't, which is what makes this even so frustrating. Because the talent's there. The talent's there. There may be, like we've talked about, they really need one more top six forward. and the talent's there. The defense, the kids, they're all going to have their growing pains.
I think
But
with
the West,
I think with Colleton, here's my philosophy on and I've never been a coach, so this is coming straight off of the top of the head. My philosophy on coaching, especially at the highest level of a sport in the NHL, in my opinion, the best way for a young guy like Jeremy Colleton or any other young guy to find themselves in a head coaching role is to be an assistant coach. Like, he came in to the dressing room with it being his dressing room, and he was 35 years old with a year and a half of coaching experience. Oh, and by the way, with players who have won 3 Stanley Cups, players who have been in the league for 10 years, Stan Bowman put him in a not so
unwinnable situation.
Right. Yeah. So if you wanted Jeremy Colleton to be your next coach, one of the assistant coaches has to go. Because I guarantee you learn under an experienced head coach like Joel Quenneville, you're going to be a better coach. And like you said, they can't afford to. You can't learn on the fly with Taves, Kane, Keith. I get it, he's not playing, but Seabrook, like these veteran guys who are so used to winning and so used to a certain style of coaching for their entire career. You can't throw in some fresh meat dude and expect good things. So
I really wonder if Colleton's ever actually, in the year and a half that he's been up coaching the Hawks, if he's ever actually had, like what you said, one of those kick the stool moments.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, because if you watched, I don't know if you saw this, but I think the team released it. Somebody released it. It was Kane's speech after his 1,000th point. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
In the locker room. Right. Well, Colleton just kind of walked in like this nerdy, goofy geek with his glasses and, the prep look, and just stood in the corner with his hands in his pocket. Like, aren't you the head coach? Like, shouldn't you be swearing and be like, yeah, fucking May, Kaner, and all this stuff? Like a coach, like, you look like a zombie. What's like an intern? What are you doing? So, yeah, when I'm seeing that, it's like, I get pissed off on Twitter. Like, I can't. Like, does this guy have a pulse?
Well,
last night.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
your opinion on the goal. Like, he should have went nuts because, like I said, it wasn't just the goal. It was the cross check to the face. It was, whether you want to argue about the play or whatever, something should have, he should have went off on something. Because there hasn't been a game, at least of recent memory to me, where the Hawks have, it's been a gut punch like last night. And you needed something. It's not that, even Leonard looked, I don't know, maybe Leonard was just, who's usually, very vocal. He was kind of just, I know he said they got screwed out of a point on Twitter, but, that's on Twitter. It's where is the emotion and the energy? I read this article from somebody that said after the win in Arizona, they were playing It's a Long Road to the Top.
Yep.
Where is that?
Yeah, I think it's got to go both ways. I think you have to, and this is why I say that, and I feel like sometimes people think, I'm literally stupid, and that I'm taking this crooked approach to why I dislike Jeremy Colleton. Everybody goes for stats. Everybody's like, okay, look, he's got the team in a competitive position. And, okay, I get that. But where I have an issue is what it means to be a coach. Not what do you do as a coach. Like, do you draw plays? You make sure everybody's at morning skate. You do disciplinary action. No, it's about what you bring to the dressing room and to the roster as a person, and how can you motivate these players, and at the same time, how can you be on these players? Because they're all grown-ass fucking men, okay? They don't need a babysitter. They don't need a father figure. But they do need somebody to go, hey, it's fucking time to turn it on, boys. Let's go.
Yeah, so,
let's get it together.
I've mentioned Gallant. Like, so if you're going to replace Colleton, who are you going to hire? Are you like, is it going to be a name coach like a Gallant or a Laviolette, or like, to me, a guy I would look at? It's been a coach, a Jack Adams winner. A lot of people probably don't know who he is, and he coached me. It's Paul McLean, and he's a power play guy. Like, he was just hired in Columbus for Torts, and they brought him in to help with the power play. He's Quenneville's. He looks like Quenneville, actually. He's got the mustache. And he's a power play guy, but he's a veteran coach. And he was a Babcock protege, so think about that as you will. But so he went with a dog shit Ducks team to the finals in 2003, won a cup with Detroit, and then you talk about a dumpster fire of a team that, how many years ago the Senators to the Eastern Conference Final against, I don't remember who it was against. Was it Pittsburgh? I think it was Pittsburgh.
Is it? Yeah.
I think that might have been their first cup of that back-to-back run. But either way, like, that's the guy. I don't know if it was you that I talked to about this or somebody else, but Steve Martinson's another guy. The guy's got 10 rings in the minors, and he's never even coached in the AHL, which is important because when you're a head coach, usually in like the lower levels, whether it's the ECHL or the beer leagues that used to be like the CHL or the UHL or now the SPHL, you're not just the coach, you're the GM. So you bring in all the players. So you've got contacts and stuff. A guy like that, and Martinson is like a hard-nosed, hard-hitting, in-your-face guy. And Paul McLean, too, like, when he was coaching me, like, his saying was, ice hockey, not nice hockey. We're not out here playing ballet. It's not what we're doing. Which is sort of what Bowman said he wanted in the offseason. That's why he went and got Shaw and Smith and DeHaan, but I think DeHaan was more for defense reasons. But they wanted that edge, right? And yeah, they had it at the beginning of the year. But I think even that, the Gilbert's gone now. You kind of lost that. Granted, maybe this new kid they claimed will do it, but I don't know. It's just, what is this team and what are you wanting to do? Like, it feels
yeah, I think
like
they're stuck in the middle. I really feel like they don't have an identity yet.
Do you want to go all youth? And if you're going to do that full rebuild, then you get Kane and Taves have to go. Keith Seabrook, everybody's got to go. Which I don't think that's the way to go, but that's an option. Do you want to add? And if you want to add, but that's my point. If you're going to go for it now, Colleton's got to go. Even if you keep Bowman, like, Colleton's not the guy. He's not, barring a miracle. The only way I keep Colleton after this season, is if they get to like the Western Conference Final, which is possible because, like I said, the West is weak.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, that to me pretty much led me into the next question: is do they? Okay, let's give you the three scenarios. Let's say, and you answered one of them, so we'll give you two. They make it to the Western Conference Finals. Colleton stays. I would agree with that. I think if they can somehow pull this together and go that deep in the playoffs with the team they have now, obviously, the trade deadline's coming up, so who knows? I think he stays. But the other two scenarios for you are, okay, let's say they make the playoffs and get bounced first round. No matter how many games it goes, they get bounced first round. Who cares if they look good? They got bounced first round. Or they fall off and don't make the playoffs again.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say if they make the playoff, I think even if they make the playoffs and get bounced, I think he stays.
Oh, I agree.
Because it's his first, hey, you made the playoffs. You got a taste. It's time to go.
That was their goal, right? They wanted to make the playoffs. And to me, that's stupid. Your main goal should be to win. You've got, let's just forget Seabrook and Crow. If you consider Keith, Taves, and Kane, you get three of the best players to play in the last 20 years on your team. You should be competitive every year. That's why I'm saying if you're not planning on being competitive, then maybe you should trade them.
Yep.
And that's a tough pill to swallow for Blackhawks fans. But if that's what you're going to do, then you should do it. But I would also argue if that's what you're going to do, you should have done it a year or two ago. But either way,
I think
don't see him going, and I don't see him going anywhere if they make the playoffs. I don't see Bowman going anywhere. Now, to me, I think they both need to go. Bowman, if you can't fire one and not the other, in my opinion, because if you fire Colleton, you're basically taking the decision away from Bowman, I would assume. So now you've just basically told your GM to fuck off. So that's to me why I said way at the beginning, you need to fire McDonough too. The whole
systematically it's off.
Yeah.
Yep.
All of it. Tear it down. All of it needs to go. And I've heard, which is hilarious. So Jay Zawaski and all these people that have speculated, my favorite couch potato. So he claims that Al McIsaac, I know Al, but that guy, you don't want him as GM, but he's supposedly the heir apparent to Bowman. Well, there's no difference between McIsaac and Bowman. So, McIsaac's been with Bowman the whole way. They're basically one and the same. So I don't understand why you would fire Bowman and then bring in McIsaac. You might as well just keep Bowman. Because if you fire Bowman, you lose Daddy. And to me, the whole point of Bowman was to keep Daddy around. So I don't know. It's like the Cubs, which are just mind-boggling, or all of Chicago sports. It's so frustrating because I don't know if the ownership just doesn't give a shit, but it's what are you doing with management? Now, the Cubs, the ownership's the problem. And even I would say with the Sox and Bulls, it's Reinsdorf.
Oh, 100%.
The Bears, you can make your arguments one way or another, but I just, what are you doing? You have so much potential. The Cubs have so much potential, right? I want to get in on baseball, and I know you've argued that they don't have as much money as people speculate that they do, but they don't. Then what was the point of doing all of this? And it's not just the money. The Cubs had $60 million come off their payroll. You literally couldn't give Pedro Strop $1 million.
They couldn't give Eric Sogard $4 million, and he went to Milwaukee.
So I understand that you don't want to give the Yu Darvish, the Jason Hayward type money contracts. I understand that. But Castellanos signed with the Reds, who, in my opinion, have the most under the radar, best offseason in the league.
Yeah.
$15 million a year. The Cubs, Ben Zobrist was making $12 million. You couldn't afford to just basically give Zobrist his money to Castellanos. So it just is my point. The ownership in this city, I don't know. It's astounding to me. And I don't know if Rocky is just, maybe he's blind because of the success that they've had. But again, I argue, Dale Talon built the team. He was the architect. He drafted everybody.
Yeah, he planted
Crawford,
the seeds. Yeah.
Yeah. Crawford, Jarmelson, Kane, Taves, Bowen, Bickle. Like, I don't know if I said Jarmelson, like everybody. Like, he signed Hossa, Niemi, QA, all the goalies. Like,
yeah, I think I really think the problem is, and this is really gonna lead me into like the last question I'm gonna have for you is, and I'm telling you now, so you have at least a little bit of time to think about it if it's not already in your head now. Player-wise, regardless of what happens to Colliton and Bowman and everybody else, but player-wise, new acquisitions, and if it's necessary, shedding this player or that player. What do you think the Hawks need to do in the offseason, regardless of what happens in the playoffs, if they make the playoffs or not, to be a serious competitive team next year, be consistent, and cement themselves into a playoff spot instead of chasing it at the end of the season like they are? But I really think that the front office and the ownership of the Blackhawks, I think you're right, is stuck on the fact that they won 3 cups. I mean, we saw it with we saw it with the White Sox after 2005. Everybody was like, "Oh, okay, well, that move worked, so let's go get Adam Dunn." Like, no, getting players and winning now doesn't work anymore. We're in a new era of the game.
That's what was weird about the White Sox, I thought, is because I disagree with you. I feel like if you're talking about after 2005, they went away with what won. They were small ball, Ozzie Guillen, base stealing, contact hitting, and they went and traded for Jim Thome. Like, and that's, I guess, maybe the precursor to Adam Dunn, right? The long ball guy. And did they make the playoffs in 2006 or did they miss? I don't remember.
The last thing I remember, it's so long ago. That's a terrible thing to say as a White Sox fan, but the last thing I remember is the blackout game against the Twins. And they had Griffey in center, and yeah.
Yeah, didn't they have Manny too?
That was after. That was I want to say a couple years after. Okay. But I mean, look at you have Shaw came back, Saad came back. Obviously, Taves and Kane are they're centerpieces of your franchise. So that's that.
Well, and he traded for Lad Noduya back too.
Yeah,
Sharp.
Yeah, and I kind of just feel like it's like we're getting the band back together. Like we're gonna be, it just like the old days. Like I'm sorry, but the old days don't work. These sports, all of these sporting organizations. I don't even know if that's the right term for it, but they're constantly evolving in the fact that what won last year is not going to win this year. And what's winning this year is not going to win next year. That's just the way it goes. That's why all of these people's jobs are so difficult. And yeah, you might have a stretch where, a certain player is like the guy and he's been winning you games and all this other stuff, but he's just as vulnerable to the system as the system is to the system. The player might not be that good next year, which again is why everybody's job is so difficult and why it's so frustrating as fans to watch these front offices make these decisions, and it's almost like they're basing it too much off of the past.
The past, right?
I get it. You have to have some sort of resume on a player. I mean, if you have a guy that let's say scores, he scored 30 goals in 2017, and then 25 in 2018, and then this year he finishes with, let's say, 28. You're like, okay, I can expect something around there. But when you completely bank on this guy having 30 goals and that's all you need is a 30-goal scorer, I think you're setting yourself up to fail. I think you have to bolster a roster in any of these in any of these sports nowadays in order to protect yourself from the vulnerability of players declining, because it's happening. In other sports in this city, Mitchell Trubisky took a huge step back. In basketball, Lauri Markkanen took a huge step back. Zach LaVine's defense isn't where it is.
Really step back, though?
I think he did.
I mean,
I think he did.
See,
and I know that like we're both in all of these sports, so I'm gonna respectfully cut you off so we can have a Bears podcast in the future. But
okay.
But the just the point I'm trying to make is these players are really taking steps back. I don't know if it's off-season training. I don't know if, they're making so much money that it's like, I don't care. I got the money. It's almost like they don't really, and I hate to say this because I don't know this for a fact to be true, obviously, but I kind of feel like that their work ethic is slipping because these contracts are getting so big and for not too many reasons. So it's just one of those things where you're sitting back and watching, and it's like, I understand going all in is really exciting for fans, and it can be exciting and ignite a franchise for a year. But in my opinion, I really believe that being careful in a sense of almost counting on a guy to suck and having somebody that can fill him in, I think that's the way to go. I mean, having reinforcements is huge. So are you asking me what I think they're going to do or what I would do? Yeah, let's go mixture of both.
Okay.
I know it's a loaded question, but I feel like, we can end this on a loaded question, and that can be the exclamation point.
Well, what I would do is Saad's got to go. Smith has got to go. Gustafson, you don't bring. Well, to me, Gustafson and Crawford should both be traded before the deadline.
Sure.
I don't know if they do that or not, but either way, both of them are gone. Mitchell's on the team. One of DeHaan, which would have to be, I would think, through a trade, has to go, or you have to get rid of Mata. Now, they do have the option, and this is probably what I think they'll end up doing with Mata. They'll probably buy Mata out, and because Mata's, I don't know particularly what the age is where that you're allowed to do this. Maybe it's under 30. I don't know, or maybe it's 25 because he's, I think, 24. Where you can buy out like the contract for basically half the money. So like it's not like buying out Brent Seabrook. So if they buy out Mata, they save $3 out of the $4 million on his contract, and you don't have to try to find a trade partner. You can just basically make him and that money go away. So that's one area and one thing I think they'll do to get money to put elsewhere. I would re-sign Kajula. To me, he's got to be brought back. Obviously, Leonard's got to be brought back. And you've got to figure out a way to add a top six forward. I don't know, in the market, there's going to be Alex Galchenyuk, who's a winger, who's struggled in Pittsburgh. He struggled in Phoenix. He started off like wildfire in Montreal, but kind of went downhill from there. So maybe that's a low risk move that you can get for $4 or $5 million in free agency. Evgeny Dadonov will be out there, but again, he's on the wrong side of 30. I'm not sure you want to bring him in. Hoffman from Florida is going to be out there. Again, wrong side of 30. I'm not sure you really want to bring him in. But that's what's going to be available in free agency. That's probably your top guys for top six players. Back to what I think he's going to do, other than getting rid of Mata. I think Crawford's gone. I think Gustafson's gone. Leonard will be brought back. And I actually think he's going to keep Saad, which I think is the wrong decision. And I think he's going to move, whether it's Kubalik or Strom or DeBrincat. I think one of those guys is going to be traded. I don't know, kind of, Panarin-esque. I don't know for what or for who. But Bowman seems to have this loyalty to guys that I just don't understand. And from the rumors that I've seen, I know Edmonton, Boston, Pittsburgh have all inquired about Saad in a trade.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently it got pretty far with Boston. I know they were talking about, I think it was John Moore was his name. I think they were going to acquire another defenseman at over $3 million who's not even playing for Boston. He's like their seventh defenseman, so that should scare people. So I've read Bowman would have to be blown away to trade Saad. So if he's going to keep Leonard, and maybe he lets Kajula walk, I don't know. I know they liked him, that they tried to sign Kajula before they traded for him with Edmonton. So maybe they'll keep him around. Like I said, I definitely would. I think he's one of their better players when he's healthy. And Shaw has to go. I don't know if I said that, and that may be the biggest problem. I don't know how you trade a guy that's got, one, attitude problems, doesn't really add all that much offensively to a team, and he's got concussion problems. And he's still got 2 years left on his contract after this year. I don't know.
I think that might be. Obviously injuries are going to happen, but I think Andrew Shaw might be the biggest
albatross.
Yeah. I think he's just. I think he's over the hill. I think.
And by the way, because I don't know how this, maybe because of just the hosting situation, Brent Seabrook is not retiring. He's not going on LTIR. Everybody thinks the Hawks are going to LTIR Seabrook. He's coming back. He's already had all of his surgeries. And, the time frame for all three surgeries was 4 to 6 months. And he's already 2 months into his shoulder surgery. So he could be theoretically halfway done with that recovery. He's a month into one of his hip surgeries, and he just had the other this week or last week probably. So he may not start the season, but I would guess that by December he's going to be playing. Is he going to be an everyday player? Maybe not. But I don't see him going. He's coming back. Do they trade him? I don't know. I think their out with Seabrook is probably the expansion draft, where they can get him to waive his no-trade clause, and they can expose him. And maybe they work something out with, I think Ron Francis is their GM out in Seattle now, but whoever, they work out a deal for them to pick up Seabrook. But whatever. This is why I said, I don't want Bowman or Colleton involved this offseason, because I don't think it's going to end well. Judging based off past off seasons and stuff, if you just the guys that I mentioned earlier that I said I get rid of, it's basically the same thing. It's 11 to 20 million bucks. You figure the salary cap goes up $2 million. If you get rid of DeHaan and you get rid of Shaw, that's $10 million bucks. And Gustafson's another $2 million, $12 million. Leonard's money comes off, so that's $5 million. So you're close to $20 million. And Smith, you get rid of Smith, so that's another $3.5 million. The money's there. You just got to get rid of the dead weight. And you still got Kane, Taves, Kubalik, Nylander, Doc, DeBrincat, and Strome. And you can bring back Leonard, obviously, with that money. And Kajula, too. And you'd still have 10 to 12 million to go out and do something with. But like I said, the problem is there's not really anything in free agency that knocks your socks off. So that's maybe why I think they'll try to trade somebody that has some value for something. But are you going to get value back? I mean, Like,
Yeah.
what are you going to get?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting approach to the trade deadline because, I mean, I'll cover this, and feel free to join me on the next episode, probably tomorrow, or close to the weekend. But I really feel like this road trip coming up two against Winnipeg, Calgary, and then Vancouver. I think this is a turning point-esque road trip. I mean, you're going through everybody in the Western Conference that you need to play. I mean, aside from Vancouver, but you have Calgary who you're chasing. Winnipeg is right on your heels, but they're cold right now, so you have a prime opportunity to really catapult yourselves into a playoff spot. And obviously, if whatever happens in the next couple of days leading up to the game in Winnipeg, you could be 4 points out of a playoff spot. You could be 2. You just never know. But there's a real opportunity there. And if you don't come away with at least 7 or 8 points, there's big problems. And I get it. There's still 23 games left after this road trip, but you're looking bleak if you don't dominate this road trip. I know that's kind of crazy to say because there's 23 games left.
I don't think they're going to do much of anything at the deadline, honestly. I foresee them either standing pat probably, or like I said, if there's an offer out there that's too good, they'll ship out Crawford and Gustafson. And by the way, it should be noted, and maybe I'm just conspiracy theory here, something's going on with Leonard, because if anybody that follows him on Twitter, he's getting new pads. And a guy
I saw that.
If he's leaving or thinking about being traded, that's not something he'd be doing with 20 games left in the season, roughly, or whatever, 30 games, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but I think that's pretty telling that he's planning on sticking around. So, maybe that is a clue, maybe that they will deal Crawford, and maybe that's why Crawford's been playing lately. They're trying to showcase him that he's healthy, maybe. I don't know.
I don't necessarily. I wouldn't consider that a conspiracy theory. I think that's just a matter of fact, and just just laying out the possibilities. I think there's the conspiracy theory would be, well, Crawford played because he bitched to Colliton about not playing enough, and there's some crazy shit out there that people love to make up for engagement on social media and stuff like that. So, but I got to say, man, I know, and for reference, we disagreed heavily on a Crawford situation a long time ago. That's how we connected on Twitter.
It's kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
I don't know if people might not know, but we almost killed each other.
Yeah. But I think this was a really good conversation. We covered a lot, and for the listeners out there, if you made it to the end of this episode, fucking bravo, stick tap. I mean, 3 stars of the game, Jesus. But Kyle, I appreciate you coming on, and I'll definitely have you on in the future here. And hopefully the Hawks can string something together, and we can be talking about happy situations in the next coming weeks.
Yeah, hopefully.